Instructions are brief here. This is the Kentucky 55, Kentucky's 2+1 roadway corridor. Brought to you by Jeff Jasper and Brad Bottoms. Just a brief reminder, all your evaluations are on the app. You have to submit an evaluation. You can't hear me at all?
I think it's all right.
Paul's being too loud. Is that better, Kelly? Nobody will see me anyway. Okay, I'll start over. This is Kentucky 55, Kentucky's 2+1 roadway corridor with Brad Bottoms and Jeff Jasper. Bios are in your app if you want to read through those. A reminder to fill out your evaluation on your phones. That's how you sign up to get the prizes later today. So with that, Jeff.
Thank you, John. Test 1, 2, y'all hear me? Back, good deal, good deal. I am the warm-up act for the workforces over here to my right, Chris and Brad, and they'll get into Kentucky 55 more and the specifics of that project. But I'm going to lead us off with just a brief overview of what 2+1 roadways are. Now, growing up, living at home, my mom used to have a book called All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Anybody heard that one? Okay, a few people. Old book. Had a bunch of short stories in it. The premise, the author talked about lessons that we learned in kindergarten, and that if the adults in the world would follow those lessons, that this would be a better place, better world. So I'm thinking about this presentation, and I'm like, I'm going to be in a room full of engineers, and 2+1, everybody knows that equals 3. Everybody knew that in kindergarten. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I go with that theme. So I'm going to pull out some themes to help us think through alternating passing lanes, which is what we call 2+1. So, you know, some of the things out of the book. First one was wash your hands. Well, post-COVID, that's this guy wrote this book in the 80s. This seemed, you know, revolutionary. We should have been washing hands all along, right? Take a nap every afternoon. Anybody knows me? I take a nap almost every afternoon. So you ought to try it if you like it. 2+1 equals 3. So what is a 2+1? Well, so our industry, it's actually comes more from the Europe area, but our industry has given the name 2+1 to alternating passing lanes. So if you worked as a road designer, worked in roads, which everybody in the room has, you know, we've had truck calming lanes. Kentucky uses a lot of those. Truck calming lane is kind of a different traffic operation. Does allow for vehicles to pass, but we only do that when the truck has to slow down going up the grade, right? We also have intermittent passing lanes. Occasionally, we'll provide a little bit of relief, and we'll just have a passing lane for a little while. But the 2+1 lane, the difference that our industry has decided is that a 2+1 is alternating passing lanes, and it's continuous between destination points. So what this tool is used for, it's really, really good for rural areas with moderate traffic and not a whole lot of access points. Everything I said right there is really important for this tool to be pulled out of the toolbox and be used, okay? So on the top, they call that asymmetrical, but even us engineers, when we put something in a book, we even make asymmetrical look symmetrical because it adds perfectly passing opportunities every single time. That's misleading. If you're going with an asymmetrical, basically the way I think about it is you're adding passing on the outside of whatever road is there. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to perhaps slide those passing lanes up and down, miss access points, miss sensitive areas. Folks in District 3 are working on Kentucky 90. South of Forest Cave going down to Glasgow. One of the alternatives was a 2+1 like you see on the bottom, a symmetrical, but what they ended up coming back with is they're just kind of doing the intermittent passing areas just because the corridor and the context, they could figure out where to add passing opportunities. So it's close to an asymmetrical. Kentucky, to my knowledge, if anybody knows any different, let me know. Kentucky really hasn't done an asymmetrical, but we have done symmetrical. When the guys get up here and talk about Kentucky 55, what you'll see is a 3-lane section going from point A to point B, and then alternating passing. So the key to this tool, for this to work, is you really have to focus on how long the passing opportunity is. That's a key decision. It's not just as easy as saying, okay, this is mile point 1.0, so we're going to allow 2 lanes passing east, and then at 2.0, we're going to turn around and allow two lanes passing west. Doesn't work that way at all. That's the reason I like it. It's a thinking man, thinking woman's game, because you got to put on your engineering hat and figure out the best opportunities, how long, where do you need to conclude the passing lane, and that sort of thing. But like getting back to the length, the way this works is, for this to work well, is as 1-lane operation approaches 2 lanes, you're going to have a slow driver out front of a queue, and how many ever cars behind it, right? When you enter a passing opportunity, the slow driver is going to speed up, right? You've seen that many times here. Why do they speed? You're driving 50 in the single lane, you get to the 2 lane, they go 60. I don't know why, but they do. Well, then all of us behind them, I'm an aggressive driver, please forgive me. All of us behind them now, we're going to accelerate, and we're going to get around the slow car. We need enough length, or I like to think of it in terms of time. We need enough time to dissipate that queue and get everybody calmed back down to their driving the speed that they like. So if the slow driver is now going 60, I'm going 65, 67, maybe 70, who knows? But now I'm comfortable and I'm driving free. Well, as I enter in the single lane operation, I may run into a queue again. I know that in about a minute, hopefully, I'm going to get an opportunity to pass the cars again. In the context that we're using this tool, we're expecting that these rural areas, that you have people that have driven this day after day, going to work, going to Walmart, going to church, going to family. They know that there's going to be a passing opportunity. Oh, it's just right up here. And what it does, the human effect, the human factor, is it calms everybody down. They realize they're going to be able to pass the tractor, the slow driver, or whatever, and it just works. So, again, key length, but also volume. So let's talk about that. Back to lessons from kindergarten. Share everything. We should always share what we have. So if you've been blessed with a lot, share a lot, okay? Another lesson, Play-Doh Fun Factory was really cool. I had one of those when I was little, really liked it. So you grab the Play-Doh and push it through different shapes, and it would come out like the tube or the square or the whatever, the star. Well, try as you might, there's only so much Play-Doh you can get through the template, the circle, the square, whatever it is, right? There's only so much traffic you can get through a 2+1. 2+1s work really well to improve traffic flow on moderate traffic volumes. So it works well, fails. Once it gets over the hump, it's going to be bad. This is straight out of the Green Book. You can see vehicles per hour here. We've kind of gotten away early on. Everybody was kind of looking at average daily traffic, and that's probably not the best way to think about this. It's better to think about vehicles per hour, and then recommended passing lengths. Now, in my opinion, getting down to about half a mile is probably too low. Gives me a little bit of concern, because if we introduce half a mile and you don't dissipate that queue, then you're going to start getting some aggressive driving. You're going to get people kind of angry. Oh, I didn't make it this time, and I have to wait another minute. They're not going to like that. So I trend to try to push more to 3/4 if we can get it. That needs to be all through passing. You are going to have merges, so you got to think of that length and not count that as part of the passing opportunity. But so when we are starting to measure this 0.5, 0.7, 1.0, that's really, you want the white dashes all the way through that area so people can pass. So 2 miles starts to get a little too high. And then you're not getting as much benefit from it because the queue is dissipated. Everybody has gotten to the speed that they want to drive, and you've got gaps between cars. So you don't want to trend too high. So length is really, really important. So what we want, dissipate the queue. At worst, if you're bad luck, you may catch up to the slow driver right as the single lane approaches. But that person probably thinks, well, I got time to check my text until the next message. But no. So where does it fail? How does it start to fail? It starts to fail in what I was describing just a few seconds ago. If you're driving fast and you're overtaking a slower vehicle and you're merging from 2 to 1, now you're starting to run the risk of crashes. Or if there's so many cars that this situation that we're showing here, this vehicle has to merge right, correct? Correct. So there has to be enough gap for that person to get in. You ever approached an interstate where it goes from 2 lanes to 1 and everybody kind of slows way down to start zipper merging in between each other, right? If we've got so much volume that people are braking, slowing here at this friction point, you're actually decreasing capacity. It's actually better to just have 2 lanes because people, even though people are going slow behind whoever's controlling the queue, this starts to back everybody up when there's a lot of traffic volume. So I'm gonna go back. You can see this 1200 is shown as the max. Sweden is the leader on this. Believe it or not, they've got like 1,500 miles of 2+1 in Sweden. So they know what they're doing. They've had stuff for 20 years over there. So they've actually had hourly volumes getting closer to the 1,500, but they're starting to see that once they reach that, that they are hitting that friction when the cars merge. And when they know that that's going to happen, sometimes like special events, like a soccer game or something of that nature, they'll actually come and put grabber cones and actually get rid of the alternate passing lane and just leave them 2 lanes. Even though they have a 3rd lane in the middle, they'll stop it because they'd rather have 2-lane flow than this situation. Okay. So works well, works great until too many cars. There's one other Achilles heel. But let me get back to the kindergarten. Play fair. I try to teach that to my kids, try to do that for myself. Don't hit people. That's a great kindergarten lesson, and that's directly relatable to what we're talking about. If we just get our drivers not to hit each other, this will be a better world, correct? Much safer. Well, hitting cars, don't hit people, that's the other Achilles heel. If you're going to have many access points along these corridors, then you're going to have an opportunity. You're going to have different speed differentials, either a car entering into the roadway who's driving slowly and trying to get back up to speed. And of course, we're increasing speeds. These guys will talk about that in a little bit. But you're increasing speeds on the free flow, and a car pulls out. Now there's a speed differential. There may be a crash. Or if a vehicle needs to turn, there are some tricks that we can do. I'm getting ready to talk about some updated guidance that's going to come out here soon. Got some news on that when we get to it. But what we are showing in the guidance is if you would put in a turn lane on just a regular 2-lane road, then those same justifications for a 2+1. And then it goes just a little bit further than that. So in other words, anywhere you would put a turning lane on a 2-lane road, you should put one on a 2+1. And it goes a little bit further. It says that the project manager and the project team can actually reduce, in special cases, reduce the number of turns and go ahead and factor in putting in a turning lane in those situations if they feel like there's a high risk. And these guys talk about that too. So we're going to have a couple situations, maybe that we do a designated left, Or perhaps if there are small access points on both sides here, we may come with a two-way left turn lane. And we've done this a few places and it seems to be working. No crash history as of yet. I asked them that about a month ago, but I haven't asked them this week, so I didn't know if there's any updates. Okay. So, a couple more kindergarten things. Draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day. That's great. And then another lesson, yellow and white are really cool. That's for my traffic operations friends. They love yellow, they love white. But these are actually screenshots of traffic operations, new pavement markings and signs and how they plan to do 2+1s from now on. So that's a big gain right there. Last kindergarten facts that I have for you here. Be aware of wonder, and then the biggest word of all is look. And so be on the lookout for a joint memorandum from Mr. Layson and Mr. Tharp. Talked to Mr. Tharp this morning. He's ready to move this, and this will come out and launch the new guidance. We've had a lot of learning, and it's been 9 years, 10 years since we've been tracking this. But we feel like we've improved the guidance, and especially with these District 4 folks helping us. I know there's one in District 3, District 5 is looking at some, so it's starting to come up and be used more and more. If you ever need my help, give me a call. I'll be happy to help you, and I'll turn it over to Brad.
All right, I'm gonna talk, Chris and I are gonna talk some about the Kentucky's first 2+1 corridor, which is in Districts 8 and 4 along the Heartland Parkway corridor. Real quick, Chris didn't get an introduction. Chris is our design supervisor in District 4. Chris has personally designed 30-something miles of 2+1 at this point, so he's very, very familiar with those, and he's gonna get into some of the details specific to our project. I'm gonna give you a little background on the history of how this corridor turned into a 2+1, because it was originally envisioned as a 4-lane divided facility. So, kind of moves from the theoretical that Jeff was talking about to the practical application we've had in the last few years here. So, Heartland Parkway corridor runs from the Cumberland Parkway in Columbia to the Bluegrass Parkway north of Springfield. So it runs through Adair County, Taylor County, and Campbellsville, runs through Marion County, Lebanon, through Springfield and Washington County, and then on up to the 555 corridor. This was originally envisioned in the late 90s by local community leaders, just kind of an economic development opportunity to kind of give a better transportation system in the area. A lot of this roadway was rebuilt in the 50s and 60s and 70s, some of it. That it all met 55-mile-an-hour design criteria. It was all essentially a super 12-foot lanes, 10-foot, 12-foot, either paved or gravel shoulders. So it's a pretty good facility, but the local community had industrial aspirations and felt that they weren't getting the attention that they needed because of the transportation system and need something bigger there. So the Heartland Parkway Foundation was formed, local community leaders, county judges, elected officials that kind of lobbied and pushed for a Heartland Parkway concept that you kind of see here. In 2005, there was a planning study completed. 2005, there was a planning study completed that looked at a few different options. We'll talk about it in a minute here. But the corridor overall had some sensitive resources on it. That it was this slide had some historic homes, had a state park, had a Civil War battle site, across the outstanding resource water of the Green River, several things like that. So a lot of considerations. The 2005 planning study looked at 3 different options. It looked at option 1 was a 4-lane divided, fully controlled access facility. Interchanges and all, brand new route from end to end. This is about 70 miles from parkway to parkway. Some of that was existing bypasses, some of that was proposed additional bypasses around some of the towns there. So option 2 that was looked at in the study was a 4-lane divided, partially controlled access facility, basically improving the existing Kentucky 555 and Kentucky 55 routes, in addition to bypasses around towns that didn't already have them. And then the third option looked at the time was actually a before they were called 2+1s, it was with consideration of adding passing lanes here and there throughout the corridor, to help move that truck traffic along, things like that. 2005 study ultimately recommended option 2, so the partially controlled widening of the existing facility. That's how they wanted to move forward. They would widen existing two bypasses that weren't already there, widen existing bypasses to 4-lane divided, and have a full 4-lane divided facility from end to end. About 50 miles of that was existing 2-lane corridor. About 20 miles of that was existing bypass or proposed bypass around the community of the town center. So the price tag put on that at the time was in the $450 million range from end to end. So obviously a massive undertaking. Obviously required a lot of right of way, a lot of utilities, had a lot of the same concerns you have on any corridor like that. It's big, nice, wide right of way, a lot of water lines, a lot of utilities in there that have been put in the last 50, 60 years. A lot of things to deal with, in addition to the historic resources we talked about there. So, I will slide this next one, but I'll talk to it. So, John Moore was still at the district court at the time, and it was around the time that the guidance, the 2+1 guidance came out that Jeff mentioned about 9 or 10 years ago from central office. So John and I started looking at the 2+1 guidance, looked at this corridor. The 2005 study had some pretty lofty traffic projections. It had about 5% growth rate over 25 years. It was pushing over 20,000 ADT on the whole corridor by around this time now. None of that ever came to fruition. The corridor has remained pretty much flat, and some sections have even declined in traffic in the last 20 years. So certainly not the need for the 4-lane divided from a traffic perspective. So we went to the local officials, went to the Harlem Parkway Foundation. We started talking to them about alternatives, about the pros and cons of the 2+1, especially with the traffic numbers in consideration. They wanted things done as quickly as possible, obviously, to get the economic benefit. But by the time, this is 10 years later after the study, you were over $500 million to complete this corridor as envisioned with the 4-lane divided. And that was just simply not attainable in a reasonable amount of time. And the local officials understood that. They didn't have that, depending on the administration, they didn't have that much lobbying power to push for something along those lines. We presented a 2+1 option we presented it as an interim option. We can do this, we can get it on the ground quickly, and it'll cost $80 million instead of $500 million, and that includes 7 miles of new bypass. And the rest of that is live and existing 2-lane facility to a 2+1. So after a lot of back and forth, a lot of working with those folks, giving them numbers, you get 90% of the benefit on these traffic volumes with 15% of the cost. That was the biggest selling point, and you can get these on the ground quickly. We finally did convince the Heartland Parkway Foundation and their political side to accept a 2+1 as a viable alternative there. We had actually already done preliminary design and NEPA on the southernmost section of this as a 4-lane divided. I went through a few years of that work. We actually got us signed EA Fonzie. We made a determination there, and they were starting to lobby for funding in the 2014 highway plan when we were talking about all this and trying to get them to change to 2+1. So fortunately, we were successful there. They got money in the 2014 highway plan for a 2+1 in Adair County, the southernmost end of this corridor. That's in District 8. And in 2015, District 8 put out their first section. And by the fall of 2015, we had 6 miles of 2+1 open to traffic. That's how quickly it went. Versus a 4-lane divided, we might have had it constructed at this point with all the right of way utilities and construction costs that would have been involved. So it certainly moved things forward very quickly. The local officials, the Harlem Parkway Foundation, saw how quickly it moved. They were very pleased with the result and what it did for traffic and the feedback they got from industry and commercial users. And they pushed and lobbied for additional funds for the rest of the corridor. And I said, Chris is going to talk more about the rest of the corridor and kind of what we come up with in District 4, some of the challenges we face, some of the specific considerations. Anything else, Chris? Or
so after the Adair County section was pretty much being completed, we started design on our next section that we were going to take over in District 4, which went from the Dare County line there in Colbert community up to Campbellsville, existing 5-lane section. It was roughly 9 miles long. So we went ahead, designed that in-house, took it through final design in 2020. We opened that section. Just to give you an idea on cost, it was 8.7 miles and we constructed that for $8.9 million. So compared to 4-lane, definitely a lot of benefit there. And then September 2021, Washington County section opened from Marion County. Getting all mixed up here. July of 2019, Marion County opened. We opened a short segment outside. We had funding for that, 3 miles, $2.9 million. September 2021, Washington County section opened, 4.4 miles for $5 million. So again, the cost per mile is down there to carry the volume. And then this September, currently, we're looking to open the last remaining section that we have designed to this point. It's Taylor and Marion County section from Campbellsville and Taylor County all the way to Lebanon and Marion County. It's roughly 16 miles. We designed that in ORD, put it out. It led in September and it's pretty much complete at this point, other than some minor striping and rumble strips. So overall, in our district, we've completed 32 miles of this configuration for around $34.7 million. And just want to emphasize that, this still, we don't view this as a sacrifice to the purpose and need of this project. We still fulfilled that the safety aspect and mobility that was there from the beginning. We just maximized the dollar for what we had. So public feedback's always pretty interesting. We did a survey a couple times, put out message boards, trying to get feedback from the public. And right away, we realized that no one else knows how to drive except for the person responding, which is really surprising. Everyone was actually drivers, but no one else understood how to use this thing at all. There's just a few comments that we had received. I love this section, great flow of traffic, big improvement. Got comments from truck drivers, and then my favorite, whoever designed this should be terminated. I've been trying for 7 years, it hasn't worked. So we're still carrying on. Just some other questions from the survey. Travel faster through the passing lane section than previous. And so everyone felt like the flow was much better as a whole. And to go along with that, as far as safety, I mean, the public even, as a whole agreed that they felt that it was much safer just because of congestion and prior, you have limited sections to pass and people just take a lot of risk when they are queued up for long distances. And this goes back, this is similar to the question that I was referring to. I understand how, but there was a follow-up question at one point, and do you think others understand? Absolutely not. So, and then there was some concern early on how comfortable people would be in that merge maneuver at the end. There's always a lot of concern there. And overall, no one seemed to really have an issue. I remember one of the comments, I think as far as safety wise, the Dare County section, we got a lot of comments on shoulder width. I think it ended up with a 4.5 foot shoulder width, but that was compromised due to a utility impact. And we addressed that in these following sections. So really, as Jeff said, to build these, we've had to rely more on engineering judgment than previous normal projects, I guess. Here, you have to be willing to be flexible with what flexibility is available in the Green Book and the roadside design guide, instead of just strictly using a chart and trying to apply that to every scenario. We had to use our heads, what little I got, to try to figure out where, where these areas are and, turn lanes warranted and that sort of thing. And, you know, traditional warrants, as Jeff was referring to, it really didn't seem to apply here because, when you have congested areas and making that left out of the passing lane, there's always a lot of concern there for rear ends and not having dedicated left. So on this particular, corridor, we're seeing traffic volumes are roughly around 6,000 ADT, and the threshold we chose, we went back, did some speed studies, watched the existing section in Adair County, and we kind of just pulled it out of the air with a little bit of judgment that 10 lefts per hour for the volume we were dealing with was adequate. And it's worked out well. We stuck with that throughout the entire corridor, mainly because the volumes were all comparable. And then speed, of course, is always a concern. People always raising concerns that how fast, especially if they live in the area, have to turn, driveway access. So I personally went out in my hot rod Ford Focus so the people wouldn't see a state car and slow down. So pulled off on the side of all these shoulders with a radar gun, pulling some super trooper maneuvers, checking speed, and you know, really 85th increased by around 3 miles per hour compared to existing. Speeds were already up there on this particular corridor, a lot of straightaway sections. People were already letting her eat through there. So you know, really, we were just making it safer by allowing passing and people to be able to move freely. So a lot of iterations as far as the design on our side. We dealt with numerous utilities on these projects, as you'd imagine, existing 2 lanes, they were in the shoulder everywhere they could get them. So there been a lot of iterations, a lot of fore slope, back slope iterations to squeeze this in. And as a whole, let's see, I'll get to that in a second. It took very minimal right away. Next slide there. So just one example of iterations. And so as time went on, Jeff and the crew there at KYTC did more research on board with us. We came to the conclusion that a flush median would add benefit. There's definitely a safety factor there. We were already putting rumble on all striping, but then on the last 16-mile section that we constructed, we actually put a 3-foot buffer there between the opposing traffic to get rid of that. It can feel a little bit intense with all that movement going on the roadway, and then you're meeting traffic. So to ease for mainly level comfort and safety, we've added a 3-foot buffer between opposing lanes here on these recent projects. So just some things to consider when you're going to approach these projects. You really just should be prepared for a lot of political and public pressure to just put left turn lanes everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's a driveway or a Dollar General store or whatever it is. Every person you speak to from the public are gonna ask why not. So what we did early on is set this standard of 10 lefts per hour. Again, that's what we chose based on these volumes, just based on what we were seeing and went with it. So if it didn't meet the criteria and it didn't fall within a transition area that we could adequately provide one, then we did not provide one if it didn't meet that warrant. Some other things here where I have keep out listed, you know, we want to avoid having any kind of these intersections, even the entrances, whatnot. You don't want them anywhere in that taper zone. If it requires shortening or moving this transition area, it's definitely something you want to watch out for. So people's attention isn't solely on trying to merge and then someone sitting there turning in a taper area. So definitely something that we want to avoid. And then when you, in certain situations on these projects, we've had a long section that 2+1 fits perfectly, but then you get into these communities where you have a lot of access, a lot of driveways, whatever it may be. So in those areas, we implemented a twiddle even through a section that would have been a passing zone. And it's still fulfilling purpose and need. I mean, you're still getting mobility there by getting those left turners out of flow of traffic. We've also used a 4-lane section like here off the striping plans. If say a left turn is warranted and it's in the middle of a passing zone, then we widened to a 4-lane section, carried our passing through with opposing traffic single lane, and then added the left. So there is some flexibility. I know in talking to different folks, the mindset is it has to be flip flop passing, but that's not been our approach. We're still again meeting purpose and need by not just solely focusing on that. So on these projects as a whole, we have managed to construct 32 miles of this with 2 acres of right of way acquired. So, and again, that goes back to the flexibility. They broke my back packing this place, redesigning this thing over and over and over, but we've made it work, and it's turned out really well. We're really proud in our district for the progress that the Parkway's made that otherwise, funding alone, it would never been possible. And then just in consideration, just the environmental impacts alone by reducing this to this size project, that alone expedites the project so much. So now, we're not done with 2+1s. We just love it. We've got a lot of positive feedback at this point. A lot of public and political momentum gaining from these. The benefits starting to be there. We're getting addressing these again. The congested areas is always the big one. So using various roadway sections to get through particular cases has really helped us get the message across and show that we do care and we're not just blindly placing people in left lanes. We do have about 16 miles left to complete of the Heartland Parkway. It's on Kentucky 555 in Washington County, and that will finish up this parkway as a whole. We're looking to incorporate some roundabouts in the upcoming section. It's more congested area, so back to back, we're looking at some roundabouts and how we tie all that together. And we even have several long corridors still left in our district that we're looking at. This would be a good fit to meet the purpose need of those projects. 150 Nelson, Washington County, 68 Green and Taylor County, 210 Kentucky 245, and Nelson and Bullitt. So we have big expectations for these. We really do like them, and seeing what they provide for the communities that they serve. With that said, I know we've probably drinking from a fire hose here, but does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, you had the public feedback after it was built. Did you have any like public perception kind of surveys before it went in? Like what did they think it was a horrible idea? They didn't want it? Or,
Well, so we kind of took over. Jeff could probably explain more, or Brad, about the Dare County section was when we kind of started.
Yeah, so there wasn't honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of public involvement when we made the decision to switch to 2+1. It was a pretty quick decision. Money was in the highway plan, and Dare County built their first section. We just kind of went from there and went through the feedback that Chris showed earlier. So there wasn't a lot of the public engagement to go back through that. We treated it as a separate project from the original 4-lane and just moved forward with it. So, but we kind of done it on the back end. It's hard to explain a new concept like this without keeping it on the ground a lot of times.
yeah, we proposed about BE studies and they don't want.
Well, and I would suggest, now we've got quite a few in the ground. Certainly put them towards our area. In the next few years here, if we go north, south, east, or west out of Campbellsville, we'll have a 2+1 drop. And that's how much the local officials there and the elected officials are pushing for these corridors. So they really do enjoy them on existing Super 2 facilities with sufficient right of way. You can get them out the door very quickly compared to a typical project. And that's the best thing they like about them is they don't have to wait 10 years to see results of their project. They can see it in 2 years. So I think we're officially out of time, but we have a 20-minute break, so we'll just take a few questions if y'all have any.
Yes.
Each of you answered this, I apologize, but what's been the highest hourly volume that you're looking for the property sections?
We're in that 700 range on our high end, so we've been shooting to
Close to
And now we have 1,200 anywhere. Our highest ADT is, around 12,000, and that's at the edge of the city centers. But most of this corridor, like Chris mentioned earlier, is in the 7,000 to 10,000 range. So that's certainly not anywhere close to a 4-lane need, but enough traffic that a 2+1 is certainly beneficial.
Did you have any instances where you had too many access points and you needed to consolidate access via the front of the road or anything like that?
No,
Repeat the question, guys.
So the question was about access and access points, if we've had to consolidate any access points, or by any access control. On our corridor, we have not, Jeff actually encouraged us to several times, which we chose not to. We
Never listen to this.
again, our traffic volumes were low enough and our access density in most places was spread apart enough that we didn't feel that was a need. We were careful about how we placed those transition zones in those merge areas. Like I said, we've got some twiddles in our sections where there were high access density or several commercial accesses. We just went ahead and put in a twiddle section. So that we don't feel we really lost anything in the whole corridor. If it's a 5-mile section, then mile twiddle certainly hurts you. But at this point, we've got 30 miles in the same corridor, so you always have a passing lane to look forward to. But on other projects, and then even on other corridors we're looking at, we may consider access control, buying access control, moving entrances, whatever we need to do there. But based on the volume and the density we had on this corridor, we did not do anything there. And we have a mix of by permit and partially controlled access along this corridor as well. We're dealing with both. And but as of right now, the preliminary data, safety has not been an issue with those, and overall accidents have dropped what we've seen. So.
any other questions? All right, thanks.